The Vryn Empire didn't believe in coincidences, which made the discovery of the Meridian's echo particularly annoying. Korthvex stood before the observation window of Research Station Talis 9, watching the derelict human colony ship tumble through the void like a discarded toy. 300 meters of corroded metal and shattered dreams, broadcasting nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional electrical hiccup. The salvage drones had already confirmed. No survivors, no distress beacon, no obvious cause of failure. Just another human expedition that had bitten off more than its species could chew. "You're doing that thing again?" Dr. Thessian said behind him, her chitinous plates clicking in what passed for Quilloth amusement. "The thing where you look at human wreckage and feel intellectually superior?" "I'm a xenobiologist," Korthvex replied, not turning around. "Feeling intellectually superior to humans is literally in my job description." "You're a xenobiologist who wrote 17 papers claiming human music is evolutionary spam. 18. The last one was peer-reviewed last cycle." Thessian moved beside him, her 4 arms folded in a configuration that suggested she was already tired of this conversation. As an empath, she probably was. Quailoth could taste emotions in the air like most species tasted food, and Korthvex's smugness was likely giving her indigestion. "The salvage report mentions recovered data cores," she said. "Personnel logs, sensor recordings. You haven't even looked at the content and you've already decided the colonists failed because they were human. The colonists failed because they were traveling in a ship held together with optimism and welded prayers. Humans always do this. They launch themselves at the universe before they're ready, then act surprised when physics doesn't care about their feelings. And yet they keep surviving." Korthvex finally turned to face her. "Barely. The galaxy is littered with human wrecks like that one. Every 3rd salvage operation finds another colony ship that thought hope was a navigation system. Every 3rd salvage operation finds a human wreck that made it further than it had any right to," Thessian corrected. "That's what bothers you. Not that they fail. That they fail less often than they should." Before Korthvex could formulate a suitably condescending response, the station's AI chimed in with its characteristic lack of timing. "Primary data core reconstruction complete. Personnel logs available for review. Warning: multiple file corruptions. Fragmented audio data may cause—" "Play it," Korthvex ordered. "Sensory discomfort to species with enhanced auditory." "I said play it!" The observation deck's speakers crackled to life, and a human voice emerged from 3 centuries of silence. Male, tired, with the kind of accent that suggested Earth's northern hemisphere before the diaspora. "Day 47 of the crisis. Chief Engineer Ramirez is dead. The things got through the maintenance shaft while he was trying to seal the breach. We heard him screaming for about 15 seconds before—" Static consumed the rest. When the voice returned, it had acquired the flat affect of someone who'd stopped processing trauma and started cataloging it. "We've lost 17 more since my last log. The cargo bays are completely compromised. Dr. Chen thinks we can hold the aft sections if we maintain absolute silence. The Crothans hunt through vibration. Any sound, any movement, they triangulate and they come." Thessian's plates had gone still. "Crothans? Out here?" Korthvex accessed the station's xenobiological database with a thought, his neural interface painting data across his vision. Crothan Prime was 4 systems away, well within the species' expansion range, unfortunately. 6-limbed ambush predators, acid for blood, sensory organs that could detect a heartbeat through 40 centimeters of hull plating. They weren't supposed to nest on colony ships, but evolution didn't file travel permits. "Continue playback," he said. The next log was a different voice. Female, younger, with an edge that suggested military training. This is Security Chief Okonkwo. Day 53. We've tried everything. Sonic deterrents just make them hungry. Chemical weapons eat through our own decks before they affect the Crothans. We're down to 872 souls, packed into 3 sections with failing life support. We can't even whisper. We communicate through hand signals and written notes. Some people have stopped breathing loudly. I watched a child suffocate herself trying to cry quietly. Thessian made a sound like wind through hollow bones. Quailoth distress. The logs continued, each one shorter than the last. Days 61, 68, 75. The catalogue of the dying. Different voices, different languages, all describing the same slow-motion catastrophe. A colony ship eating itself from the inside, its passengers frozen in terror while predators patrolled the corridors, waiting for someone to make the fatal mistake of being audible. Then, on day 82, something changed. This is Administrator Wong. We've had a proposal, a volunteer. The voice was hoarse, scraped raw by stress and recycled air. Someone called. They're calling her the Cantor. She was a musician before the colony program, opera singer, according to her file, from someplace called Cincinnati. She says she can do something, says she understands frequencies. A pause, filled with the ambient hum of failing systems. We told her it's insane. She says that's the point, that the Crothans expect prey to be silent, to run, to make the sounds of fear. She wants to make other sounds. Korthvex felt his secondary heart skip its rhythm. No. Oh, yes, Thessian whispered. She's walking down there now, Administrator Wong continued, into Cargo Bay 7, 362 Croathans nesting in the Jeek. Dark. We've sealed every entrance except the one she's using. If this doesn't work, the administrator's voice cracked. She asked me to record it. For science, she said. So someone would know what humans tried, even if... The log cut to raw audio feed. Footsteps, light and measured, against metal decking. Breathing, controlled and deep. The rustle of fabric. Then, in the background, a sound like oil sliding over glass. Crothan movement, responding to the presence of prey. Korthvex was about to order the playback stopped when the human began to sing. It started low, almost subsonic, a note that Korthvex felt in his bones before his ears processed it. Then it climbed, not gradually but in precise intervals, each frequency chosen with mathematical deliberation. The voice was female, powerful, trained in techniques Korthvex didn't have context for. But what struck him, what made his tertiary lung forget to cycle, was that it wasn't random. Every note was a weapon. Every phrase was a calculated assault. This wasn't music. This was acoustic warfare wrapped in melody, and the human wielding it knew exactly what she was doing. The Crothan sounds changed. The oil slide became confused, chittering. Then something that might have been alarm. Impossible, Korthvex said. Replay that, Thessian demanded. Isolate the frequency patterns. The AI complied, painting sound into visible waveforms across the observation window. What Korthvex saw made his training irrelevant, and his papers looked like the work of an apprentice who'd never left the laboratory. The human wasn't just singing. She was hunting. And the predators were learning, too late, what it meant to be prey. The station's recreation of the Cargo Bay incident took 16 hours to compile, pulling data from 17 different sensor logs, 3 visual feeds, and enough corrupted files to make the AI complain twice about probability matrices. By the time the reconstruction was complete, Korthvex had assembled a team of 12 specialists, none of whom believed what they were about to witness. Dr. Thessian had invited herself to the presentation, naturally. She'd also brought Commander Zelith. a Cordran tactical analyst who'd spent 40 years studying interspecies combat doctrine. If anyone could explain how a single unarmed human had survived an encounter with a Croathan nest, it would be Zalith, whose species had lost an entire battalion to just 37 of the creatures during the Fringe campaigns. "Before we begin," Korthvex announced to the assembled researchers, "I want to emphasize that what you're about to see has been verified against 6 independent data sources. The sensor readings are accurate. The timeline is correct. And yes, the human survival rate was 100% for everyone in the affected sections." A Vothkan chemist raised one of her eye stalks. "You're saying the predators just stopped hunting?" "I'm saying watch the reconstruction." The holographic display materialized in the center of the conference chamber, rendering Cargo Bay 7 in painstaking detail. The space was vast, designed to hold terraforming equipment and agricultural modules for colony establishment. Instead, it had become a cathedral of chitin and shadows. Crothans filled every surface, ceiling, walls, floor. 362 of them, their 6-limbed bodies coiled in the patient stillness of apex predators who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. The human appeared at the entrance, a woman of average height by her species standards, wearing the simple jumpsuit of a colonist. The reconstruction had rendered her from silhouette testimony and biometric data, giving her an almost ghostly quality. She carried nothing. No weapons, no equipment, no protection. "Bioscan shows elevated heart rate," the AI narrated, "increased adrenaline production, and respiratory patterns consistent with extreme stress. Subject is experiencing fear response, typical of pre-combat human psychology." "She's terrified," Thessian murmured. "And walking in anyway," Zalith added, his translator giving his clicking speech a tone of professional curiosity. Fascinating. The woman, the cantor, as the logs had called her, moved 30 paces into the bay before stopping. The Croathans nearest to her went rigid, their sensory organs swiveling to track her position. The reconstruction showed their neurological activity spiking, preparing for the killing strike. She closed her eyes and took a breath that the sensors registered as lasting 7 full seconds. Then she opened her mouth and shattered every assumption Korthvex had made about human vocalization. The first note bypassed melody entirely and went straight for frequency dominance. The reconstruction's audio analysis painted it across the hologram in cascading colors, a pure tone that matched exactly the Crothan sensory processing range, not the range they used for hunting, the range they used for identifying their own offspring. "She's mimicking their maternal calls?" the Vothkan chemist asked, incredulous. "No," Zelith corrected, his combat instincts reading the pattern faster than the civilians. "She's hijacking them." The cantor's voice shifted, building harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a single organic throat. The reconstruction showed the sound waves propagating through the bay, each frequency calibrated to trigger different responses in Crothan neurology. Confusion, recognition, the paralysis that came from receiving contradictory sensory data. A juvenile Crothan, only 2 meters long, uncurled from the ceiling and dropped to the deck. Not attacking, approaching. The woman's eyes opened. She saw it coming and didn't run. Instead, she modified her tone, dropped it half an octave, and added a rhythmic pulse that the sensors identified as matching Croathan threat displays, but inverted. Every frequency that should have signaled predator approaching was twisted just enough to say not threat, while maintaining the authority of something dominant. The juvenile stopped 3 meters away, its acid-filled body trembling with neurological confusion. "This is insane," someone whispered. The cantor held the pattern for 40 seconds, then transitioned. The new phrase was something the human vocal apparatus definitely shouldn't have been capable of. A triple-toned harmonic that resonated in 3 distinct frequency bands simultaneously. The reconstruction's analysis started flagging anomalies. Vocal cord strain beyond safe parameters, oxygen debt accumulating in blood chemistry, microhemorrhages forming in throat tissue. She was destroying herself. Note by note, phrase by phrase, and the Croathans were responding. More juveniles descended. Then the adults, their larger bodies moving with the cautious uncertainty of predators encountering something outside their evolutionary programming. The reconstruction showed their brain activity shifting from hunt mode to something else. Not fear, exactly. More like the cognitive dissonance that came from having all your instincts fire contradictory commands at once. She's not just confusing them, Thessian said, her empathic abilities reading the patterns in a way the others couldn't. She's creating an authority gradient, making herself too complex to categorize. Predators rely on simple threat assessment. Prey runs, rivals fight, offspring submit. She's doing all of it and none of it. The woman's song evolved again, and this time the reconstruction's AI simply labeled it Unknown Human Vocal Technique. The sound was layered, impossible, a single voice producing what seemed like multiple singers in perfect coordination. Overtone singing, perhaps, or some other specialized skill that most humans probably didn't even know existed. But she knew, and she wielded it like a surgeon wielded a scalpel. The largest Croathan, the nest queen, presumably, descended from her perch on the cargo crane structure. 4 meters of nightmare physiology, capable of dissolving through reinforced bulkheads. She moved toward the human with the deliberate grace of something that had never encountered resistance. The conference chamber went silent. The cantor sustained her note, holding a frequency that the analysis showed was actively damaging her larynx. Blood vessels were rupturing. Her oxygen levels were dropping into dangerous territory. But the sound never wavered. The queen stopped, circled. Her sensory organs processed the human from every angle, searching for the category this creature belonged in. Then, in a movement that made Commander Zelith's translator emit a startled chirp, the queen lowered her front segments to the deck. The submissive posture of a Croathan acknowledging dominance. "That's not possible," Korthvex heard himself say. "Croathans don't submit to non-Croathans. It's not in their behavioral profile. They don't have the neurological framework for—" "She gave them the framework," Zelith interrupted. "She hacked their sensory language and wrote herself into it as something superior, something that couldn't be hunted because it existed outside their reality matrix." The reconstruction showed the final minutes. The cantor backing away slowly, still singing, still holding the frequencies that kept 362 apex predators curled on the deck like supplicants before a god they couldn't comprehend. She made it to the entrance, sealed it, collapsed against the bulkhead. The last image showed her hands shaking, blood running from her nose, her expression caught between triumph and the dawning realization of what she'd just done to herself. The hologram faded. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Finally, the Vothkan chemist broke the silence. "How long did she survive after that?" Korthvex accessed the remaining logs, though he already knew the answer. 3 days. Vocal cord failure, progressive lung damage, systemic hemorrhaging. The medical staff tried everything, but she'd pushed her biology past tolerance thresholds. The last entry in her medical file says she kept trying to tell them something, but couldn't speak anymore. So she wrote it down. "What did she write?" Thessian asked. Korthvex displayed the message, recovered from a medical scanner's auxiliary memory. "Worth it. Everyone lived. Not bad for a wedding singer." Zelith made a sound like stone grinding against metal. Cordrin laughter, but without humor. Your species spent 18 papers trying to prove human audio expression was meaningless noise. I think the humans were just being polite by letting you believe that. Korthvex stared at the empty holographic space where the reconstruction had been, watching sensor ghosts fade into nothing. He'd been wrong. Catastrophically, comprehensively wrong. But the worst part, the part that made his academic credentials feel like children's toys, was knowing there were billions more humans out there, each one carrying the potential for this kind of structured insanity. And the galaxy had barely started listening. The problem with understanding genius, Korthvex decided, was that it looked like suicide until you ran the numbers. He'd spent the past 30 hours doing exactly that. Running numbers, building models, reconstructing the acoustic architecture of what the Cantor had accomplished. The station's computational array had nearly overheated twice trying to map the three-dimensional soundscape she'd created in that cargo bay. Every time the simulation approached completion, new layers of complexity emerged, like peeling back tissue to find more organism underneath. Thessian found him in Lab 7, surrounded by holographic waveforms that made the air shimmer with frozen sound. "You haven't slept," she observed. "Sleep is for people who aren't having their entire professional understanding dismantled by a dead wedding singer from Cincinnati." Korthvex gestured at the displays. "Look at this. Just look at it." The central projection showed the Cantor's performance rendered as pure mathematics. Frequency curves, harmonic intervals, amplitude modulations across time. But what made it remarkable wasn't the complexity. It was the precision. "Every note," Korthvex explained, his exhaustion making him almost manic. "Every single frequency shift had a purpose. She wasn't improvising. She was executing a composition written in Croathan neurology." "You're saying she planned this?" Thessian moved closer, her empathic senses reading the data the way others might read poetry. Before she walked in there, she knew exactly what sounds to make. More than that. She understood their sensory processing better than our xenobiological databases do. He pulled up a comparison chart, Crothan auditory response profiles on one side, the Cantor's frequency selections on the other. The correlation was nearly perfect. "See these intervals? She's targeting specific ganglia clusters. This sequence here triggers their prey recognition override. This one activates parental bonding responses. And this," he highlighted a particularly vicious harmonic spike, "this creates a feedback loop in their threat assessment centers, makes them perceive danger in every direction simultaneously, which neurologically resolves as freeze and submit to the dominant force." Thessian's plates rippled with something between admiration and horror. She weaponized their own senses against them. She did it in real time, while terrified, while bleeding internally, and while maintaining vocal techniques that our database says shouldn't be possible for baseline human anatomy. Korthvex pulled up another file. The medical analysis of her performance. Her oxygen consumption during the final sequence was 30% above normal human capacity. She was generating sound using lung compression methods that should have caused immediate blackout. But didn't. Because apparently humans have this trick where sheer stubbornness can temporarily override biology. He zoomed in on the breath control data. 4 minutes 17 seconds. That's how long she held the submission frequency without pause. The longest recorded human breath hold is around 11 minutes, but that's static, meditative. She was actively producing complex vocalization while doing it. Commander Zelith entered the lab, his Cordrin bulk making the doorway seem inadequate. "I brought the tactical analysis you requested." And I've fought Crothans. I've studied every recorded encounter across 40 systems. I've seen Dreadnought-class warships fail to suppress them, because their acid blood makes them nearly impossible to kill without destroying your own vessel. Zelith activated his own datapad, adding military overlays to Korthvex's scientific projections. What this human did was develop an entirely new form of asymmetric warfare in approximately 8 hours, based on whatever resources she could access on a dying colony ship. 8 hours? Thessian asked. The logs show her requesting access to the xenobiology database at day 74, Zelith explained. She walked into that cargo bay on day 82. 8 days to learn Crothan neurology, develop a counter-strategy, and train her voice to become a precision weapon. Korthvex brought up the Cantor's personnel file, which they'd finally managed to reconstruct from backup archives. Education: Bachelor of Fine Arts in Vocal Performance, minor in Acoustical Engineering. Employment history: wedding singer, cruise ship entertainer, church choir director. No military training, no xenobiological background. Her application to the colony program listed her skills as soprano vocalist, can harmonize with anyone, good with children. She failed to mention can psychologically dominate apex predators through applied acoustic theory, Zelith noted dryly, because she probably didn't know she could until she had to. Thessian was examining the emotional resonance data, the empathic signatures embedded in the Cantor's performance. Look at the undertones here, beneath the calculated frequencies. She was broadcasting human emotional content simultaneously. Fear, determination, protectiveness. She was singing to save her people while mathematically dismantling the things trying to kill them. Korthvex isolated that layer and found himself staring at something that made his 18 papers feel like elaborate jokes at his own expense. The emotional content wasn't accidental overflow, it was structural reinforcement. The human elements of her song created a framework that made the technical assault on Crothan neurology even more effective. She was using her own terror as an ingredient, he said quietly. Humans don't separate emotion from function, they integrate it. She was scared, so she made her fear part of the weapon. That's very human, Thessian agreed. Other species compartmentalize. Soldiers suppress emotion to execute tactics. But humans. She gestured at the data. They weaponize everything, including their feelings. The lab fell silent, except for the hum of processors analyzing the impossible. Finally, Zelith spoke. I need to file this with Cordran military intelligence. If humans can do this, if they can learn a species' neurology and turn sound into a dominance weapon, every species needs to update their threat assessment protocols. It gets worse, Korthvex said, pulling up a final file he'd been avoiding. I analyzed the Cantor's technique against our database of known species. The acoustic principles she discovered? They're not Croathan-specific. They're universal. Sound is just vibration, and every species with sensory organs can be affected by the right frequencies. You're saying any human with the right training could potentially create species-specific acoustic attacks? Yes. Could hijack neurological responses through calculated sound waves? Yes. Could theoretically walk into any environment and, given enough time to analyze the local biology, turn their voice into a precision instrument of psychological warfare. Korthvex met Zelith's gaze. And before you ask, yes, I've checked. Earth has approximately 8,000 different documented vocal performance traditions. Opera, which the Cantor studied, is just one. Thessian made that hollow wind sound again. What are the others? Korthvex didn't answer immediately. He was too busy pulling up search results, each one more alarming than the last. Throat singing from Central Asian steppes, Tuvan overtone techniques, Inuit katajak competitions, Georgian polyphonic choirs, Buddhist chanting disciplines, African click languages, scat singing, beatboxing, something called death metal vocals that apparently involved making oneself sound like industrial machinery. "They've been training for this," he said finally. "For thousands of years, across hundreds of cultures, humans have been developing techniques to make their voices do impossible things. They thought it was art. They thought it was culture. They thought it was entertainment." "But it was weapons development," Zaleth finished. "Unconscious, undirected, but weapons development nonetheless. The Cantor didn't invent anything new. She just figured out what her species had been building all along." Korthvex closed the files, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Every human choir, every vocal performance, every singer in every bar across their thousands of worlds, they're all potentially what she was. They just don't know it yet. Thessian moved toward the lab's viewport, looking out at the stars where the Meridian's echo still tumbled through the void. "Do we tell them?" "Tell them what?" "That their music is actually a universal dominance protocol waiting to be activated? That every lullaby is a potential weapon?" Korthvex laughed, but it came out hollow. "They'll figure it out eventually. That's what humans do. They stumble into capabilities that take other species millennia to develop, then act surprised when we're terrified of them." "The Cantor knew," Thessian said softly. "At the end, she knew what she'd discovered. That's why she wrote, 'Not bad for a wedding singer.' She was telling us she was ordinary, that any of them could do this." The holographic waveforms continued their silent dance, frozen echoes of a song that had rewritten the rules of engagement. Korthvex stared at them and wondered how many other rules humans were going to rewrite before the galaxy learned to stop underestimating the species that had turned noise into nightmare fuel. "Mark the file classified," he told the AI. "Highest restriction level." But even as he said it, he knew it wouldn't matter. You couldn't classify an entire species' throat. And somewhere out there, millions of humans were singing. The vote to classify the Cantor files took 11 minutes, which was 10 minutes longer than Korthvex expected. Apparently, half the Research Council wanted to publish everything immediately, warn the galaxy that humans possessed innate capabilities for biological warfare through vocalization. The other half wanted to bury it so deep that not even archaeological surveys would find it in a million years. Compromise meant everyone was equally unhappy, which was probably the best outcome available. Korthvex was drafting his official recommendation, something diplomatically useless about further study required, when the station's proximity alarms began screaming. "Unscheduled vessel entering scan range," the AI announced with its usual impeccable timing. "Origin signature, human. Classification, civilian transport. Mass, 47,000 metric tons. Current trajectory, direct approach to station coordinates." Thessian looked up from her own terminal, plates clicking nervous patterns. "They can't know about our research. The files have been sealed for less than an hour." "Coincidence," Korthvex muttered, though he'd already established the Vryn Empire didn't believe in those. "Incoming transmission," the AI continued. "Audio only, broadcasting on all standard frequencies plus—" a pause that somehow conveyed algorithmic confusion. "Plus 17 non-standard frequencies previously unknown to our communications database." "Play it." What emerged from the speakers made Korthvex's earlier analysis seem quaint. It wasn't a voice. It was an assault. Guitars that sounded like metal tearing itself apart. Percussion that felt like someone had weaponized rhythm itself. And underneath it all, human vocals that seemed to be competing to see who could sound most like a biological catastrophe. The lyrics, if they could be called that, appeared to involve demons, fire, and something about an iron throne built from enemy skulls. "Is that music?" Thessian asked, her empathic abilities probably getting feedback from whatever emotions the humans were broadcasting. "I think it's called death metal," Korthvex said weakly, remembering his earlier research. "One of the 8,000 vocal traditions." Commander Zalith had gone very still, the Cordran equivalent of combat readiness. Are they aware this sounds like a declaration of war? Incoming message, the AI interrupted. Text format this time. Greetings, Research Station Talus 9. This is the human transport vessel Joyful Noise, carrying cultural exchange delegation from New Memphis. We're broadcasting our welcome playlist as a gesture of friendship. Hope you enjoy the classics. We've got 3 months of material ranging from Mongolian throat singing to Brazilian samba. Looking forward to sharing humanity's gift of music with our galactic neighbors. The death metal continued its enthusiastic description of apocalyptic scenarios. 3 months, Thessian repeated. 3 months of this. Korthvex accessed the vessel's manifest, hoping for some indication. This was an elaborate prank. Instead, he found 217 human musicians representing 43 distinct cultural traditions. Opera singers, jazz vocalists, Gregorian chanters, something called a screamo artist, a full Tuvan throat singing ensemble, an experimental noise collective from Europa Station. Every single one of them carrying techniques that, if properly applied, could theoretically restructure alien neurology through acoustic dominance. And they were coming here to share. We could refuse docking permission, Zelith suggested. On what grounds? That their music is too effective? Korthvex watched the joyful noise grow larger in the tracking display. That we've just discovered their entire species is accidentally training acoustic warfare specialists, and we'd prefer they didn't demonstrate their capabilities? Yes, Zelith said flatly. Exactly those grounds. But it was too late. The human vessel was already broadcasting its second selection, something that involved bagpipes, which somehow made the death metal seem subtle by comparison. The station's hull was vibrating in sympathetic resonance. 3 different species of research staff were filing medical complaints about auditory distress. And the humans thought this was friendship. Thessian accessed the Joyful Noises cultural database, scrolling through their planned performances. They have a section here labeled Experimental Overtone Demonstrations, another called Vocal Percussion Techniques Through History, and her plates went rigid. Something titled The Science of Screaming, How Humans Learned to Shatter Glass with Their Faces. That's meant to be educational, Korthvex noted, reading the description. For children. They teach their children how to weaponize sound? They think it's fun. He pulled up more data, each file more alarming than the last. Human vocal competitions, shows where people judged each other's ability to produce complex sounds, entertainment industries built entirely around acoustic performance. They'd commodified the very thing that the Cantor had used to dominate a nest of apex predators. They'd turned warfare into art, then art into commerce, then commerce into cultural identity. The logical conclusion settled over Korthvex like cold vacuum. Humanity didn't know what they were. They'd evolved this capability, this neurological hacking through calculated sound, and had simply assumed everyone else could do it too. When they sang to each other, they were unconsciously engaging in constant low-level dominance negotiations, emotional warfare, and biological manipulation. And they called it entertainment. Sir, one of the junior researchers interrupted, the humans are requesting permission to perform a welcome concert for the station population. They say it's traditional when making first contact with new research facilities. Absolutely not. I've already granted permission, Thessian said quietly. Because if we refuse, we look like we're afraid of them. And if we're afraid, we're admitting they're dangerous, which means we have to classify them as a threat species, which means every human vessel becomes a potential military target, which starts a war we absolutely cannot win against people who can hack biology with their throats. Korthvex stared at her. So your solution is to let them perform. My solution is to smile and pretend we're enjoying ourselves, while 217 humans demonstrate capabilities that would get any other species banned from civilized space. She brought up the concert schedule. Starting with opera, moving through jazz, incorporating traditional cultural demonstrations, and culminating in something they're calling a genre fusion finale that apparently involves all performers simultaneously. That will kill someone, Zelith said with absolute certainty. Multiple species in one acoustic space, all being targeted by different human vocal techniques at once? Someone's neurology will fail. Then we'll call it an unfortunate accident and add it to the growing list of reasons why humans are cosmically unhinged. Thessian's pragmatism was showing. Better than the alternative. The joyful noise completed its docking sequence, and Korthvex could hear them through the hull. Hundreds of human voices warming up, scales and arpeggios echoing through the station's corridors like an invasion force that had forgotten to bring weapons because they'd already weaponized themselves. His official recommendation cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for input. He typed, "Humanity's vocal capabilities represent a unique form of cultural expression that requires further diplomatic engagement. Recommend establishing protocols for acoustic exchange while monitoring for potential biological impact on non-human species. Classification: uncertain, pending additional data." It was bureaucratic cowardice disguised as scientific caution, and everyone would recognize it as such. But what else could he say? That his 18 papers were wrong? That humans hadn't evolved noise pollution but rather the most sophisticated biological warfare system in the galaxy? Then forgotten what they'd built? That every song was a potential weapon, every concert a demonstration of species-wide dominance capabilities? That the galaxy had been mocking human noise for centuries, never realizing the humans were just being polite by not singing at full capacity? The death metal faded, replaced by something the humans labeled a gentle acoustic piece to ease everyone in. It sounded like sadness given melody, simple guitar chords supporting a single voice that made Korthvex's translation software struggle with emotional context. Even their soft sounds, carried weight that most species' war anthems couldn't match. Thessian moved beside him at the viewport, watching the human delegation disembark. They looked harmless, excited, eager to share their culture with new friends. "They really don't know, do they?" she asked. "What they are?" "No," Korthvex agreed. "They think everyone can do this. They think sound is just sound, and biology is just biology, and the two only intersect through physics." Should we tell them? He considered it, imagined explaining to these enthusiastic musicians that their art was actually a form of unconscious domination, that every performance was potentially restructuring the neurology of their audience, that the cantor hadn't been special but rather just the first to recognize what humans had been doing all along. Then he imagined their response. Probably confusion, followed by concern, followed by them doing it anyway because humans seemed pathologically incapable of not sharing things. "Let them perform," he said finally. "Let them think we're appreciating their culture. And start developing new acoustic shielding for every species in the database, because this won't be the last time humans decide to be friendly." The concert began at 1900 station time. By 1930, 3 researchers had requested medical leave for overwhelming emotional response. By 2100, the human jazz section had somehow convinced a Quailoth mathematician to start moving rhythmically, an activity her species didn't have cultural context for. By 2300, the genre fusion finale had created harmonic resonances that made the station's hull sing in frequencies that wouldn't be discovered by conventional science for another decade. And somewhere in the audience, Korthvex sat and listened and understood with perfect clarity that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their stubbornness or their adaptability or their ridiculous capacity for survival. It was that they could make you feel things you didn't have the neurology for, and call it entertainment. The galaxy had thought noise was humanity's weakness, the chaotic mess of a species too young to understand the value of silence. Turned out humans understood silence perfectly well. They just preferred it when they could fill it with something that made predators curl at their feet, made researchers question their entire fields of study, and made everyone else in the universe realize they'd been having the wrong conversation the entire time. The final note faded. The humans bowed, and Korthvex began drafting his 19th paper, this one titled simply, "We Should Have Been Listening." Though he suspected, somewhere between the standing ovation and the encore requests, that humanity had known that all along.